So thank you all for being here today. I'm really excited to be here. Just to let you know, in the last year, our goal has been to get us our guide into the hands of as many students as possible. Getting it to you is really important, but getting it to you as a way to get it into the hands of many students has been really key for us, and especially, we talked to the publisher about setting it up so that it would be downloadable for free. So I can't say that enough because I'm in this mission to make sure that students know what are their options at point of transfer. So today we're going to be discussing, giving you a little bit of background of what we do at the Kaplan Educational Foundation to our programming, and also it's myself and Rachel Chambers, who's a scholar here, who's attending Emory. To give you a little bit, there's also another student here who just graduated, Smith, who attended a community college. All of our students attend community colleges, and she wanted to come down. She was excited to come down to Atlanta. And I have my director of operations here, Rhoda Tomaclo, and who else is here? And we have Mike, who works in our team as well. This is my background. I'm not going to go deep into it, but just to let you know, I'm a community college graduate. I'm also a GED recipient. I dropped out of high school at 11th grade. It's a long story behind it, where I wasn't behaving that well in high school, and kind of it just became a little problematic for me to remain there, and so I left. But I quickly took the GED, and I was lucky enough to go to Kingsburg Community College, and it was there where a professor read a paper that I wrote, and it was the first time ever that somebody had said to me, you know, I love how you think. And it's not to say that my mom didn't do that, but it was, my mom wasn't reading my writing, right? My first language is Spanish, so this was the first time that somebody has seen my writing in English and said that. And so to me, community colleges are, I just love them. I love community college students. I have had a long career in working in Kingsburg Community College, and so you could just imagine for me to be able to go back and offer scholarships and this information to students is really, I always say that I live my own dream, right, of the things that I aspire to be able to give those to other students. And in that, I have been able to really pursue my education all the way through my master's as well as through executive training. So I'm very fortunate. I just feel really blessed in many ways. Rachel?
So my name is Rachel Chambers. I was born in New York, but I grew up in Jamaica, West Indies, so I consider that more of a home. I eventually started out at a community college, which is LaGuardia Community College in New York City, and there I was a liberal arts major and humanities and social science. So during my time, before coming to New York, I went to graduated high school at 16 in Jamaica, and during my time in Jamaica, I was, fortunate enough to start a business on my own. But those reasons came from wanting to help my family with financial issues. So after doing that and graduating high school, I wanted to come and live with my mom in the States, and I was like, I really don't care what your financial situation is. I just want to come here and we'll figure everything out afterwards. And once I got into LaGuardia, my mom was actually a student at LaGuardia as well. So we were, buddies, mom and daughter duo. And she was really the motivation behind me wanting to come to LaGuardia. And while there, I was able to accomplish a lot of great things. I graduated as an honors student. I was also the valedictorian for the college. And I was able to get into the Kaplan Leadership Program, which kind of changed my life and got me here to Emory University. There's too many things to list what I've accomplished, and there's so many more to go. But once I got into the Kaplan Leadership Program, it definitely helped with a lot of barriers that not only community college students face, but just individuals of color. A lot of people don't understand that there's a huge stigma against community college students where you think, oh, they only go to community college because they were never good enough to get into a 4-year, or they don't know what it is they want to do with their lives. But to be honest, it's just a lot cheaper of a route to go to community college and then transfer into a top-tier university. And to be honest, I actually started out in community college because I was rejected from my 4 years, which is, they probably regret it now. But, I mean, I got rejected and I felt, you know, very disappointed because I was like, oh, I was never good enough, because I had this, you know, stigma against community colleges, and it wasn't until I went there and experienced it myself that I understood this was the path that I needed to take in order for me to grow in the way I needed to. And throughout the program, I was a scholar of 7. I have 6 amazing cohort members that are now doing great things at top universities like Stanford, Brown, Mount Holyoke, and the list could go on. And that program definitely gave me the platform to figure out what I wanted to do, where it is my drives and passions came from. They ensured that I grew in uncomfortable situations, that I was adaptable to challenges, and that I could strive through adversity. And they were really honest people. You know, these are not individuals that are just gonna rub your back and be like, yeah, you're gonna be great. No. They're going to keep pushing you and pushing you for you to continue to realize that you can do great things, but you have to put in the hard work in order to do that. And funny story, I applied to like 10 schools. I had my heart set on quite a few schools, and I did not get into the schools I wanted to get into. And I was very disappointed once again. And, you know, Emory was like a last-minute school that was added to my list. And I applied, and I never heard of Emory. I had no idea what this school was about. But with this program, they give you the tools to understand, you know, the ins and outs of these schools. They ensure that you are able to visit. They teach you how to network with the individuals at these schools so you can build a long-lasting relationship with them. They teach you how to interview. They give you the tools to make you a successful transfer student, wherein you're prepared to enter a high-intensity institution and strive and make your previous institution proud. And I mean, they can tell you I was crying. I didn't think I was going to transfer because I did not want to come to Emory because I had no idea what Emory was about. And Nancy and Rhoda was like, listen, we're putting you on your flight tomorrow. You're going to visit, and you can figure it out. Funny thing is, I was dreaming about Emory for like the past 2 weeks. And I was like, this must be a sign from God that I was going to be going here. And once I visited Emory, it was raining. It was just horrible weather. And I loved the school. It was like, you know, to tell you your heart skips a beat when you find that school, that was Emory for me. And I met a transfer admissions officer, I met students, and I was like, this is the place I needed to be. And I got there on a full ride for my last 2 years. And currently I'm a senior at Emory, graduating this semester, graduating with honors as well. And I must say that my time at Emory not only has been challenging, but eye-opening. I have grown in ways that I never thought I would grow. I've experienced things I never thought I would experience, but these experiences I know will give me the foundation to be a much more successful individual once I leave this institution. And it has definitely solidified my reasonings for wanting to go into healthcare. So, I mean, this program is great. And I love transfer students, and I'm always here to advocate for transfer students, especially students of color from low-income backgrounds, but also students who come from community colleges.
So I think that Rachel is a very good example of what I aspire for many students to have, and that is the opportunity to have the choice at transfer. So this is the Kaplan Educational Foundation, and the Kaplan Educational Foundation, a lot of people know about Kaplan, right? But this is the 501(c)(3) separate and apart foundation, meaning this was founded by Kaplan executives in 2006, but in reality, we are a fundraising independent, so we get our funds from many different places. So while Kaplan has been extremely generous to us and provided us with a lot of the expertise and the resources, in the last 5 years, we have really worked very independent from them because we really wanted to create kind of, to get people behind us for just the work that we were doing at the foundation. And at that time, and as you know, when you're providing test preparation as well as other educational services, one of the things that I found, again, this is one of those weird moments that I did think that the SAT was a Saturday test. And like really, I mean, and I know many people who feel that way who would never admit to it, but I remember from my high school class and knowing that I dropped out, for it wasn't mentioned, and when it was mentioned, I was like, oh, it's a test you take on Saturdays. Yeah, I get it. Like, well, I'm not taking it because there was a fee. And also, I had never prepared or thought that I could afford any type of preparation like that. So again, we started in 2006. In June 2017, which was just last year, we launched a transfer initiative program, and that is a pilot right now that we're running in order to create small groups of students in community colleges, pick the students that are high performing and providing our resources free of charge so that people will have the curriculum that we have developed in the last 10 years so that they can then work with students to get them to highly selective or selective institutions. And I'm going to explain why it is that we go into the highly selective and selective institutions. It has to do with money. Okay, a lot of people are like, you're an elitist. Oh, you only, no, the reality is that it's not that. When you have high need students, you need schools that can fulfill their high needs. And so, in doing the math, we know, but also those schools have resources beyond the financial aid. And so that's why we focus on those schools. It's not because of a name. Actually, I don't allow our students to even have a conversation like that to justify an application to an Ivy just because it's an Ivy. You have to go deeper than that. And then we just published the guide. This guide is going to be published every year. Our plan is to every year add schools to it, is to expand on the research, to have a free online service that would be able to, that students can search, that students can then say, I'm a veteran. I am, you know, a 26-year-old with a child. So what are the schools from these schools that are listed that have the resources that will be helpful to us? The reason why we decided to publish the guide it was because we also were not serving other types of high need populations. DACA undocumented, veterans, non-traditional age students, and of course, community college students. So we were serving community college students, but we were not serving those three. And so if we're talking about a mission of historically underrepresented students, I felt strongly that we needed to provide that information. Just want to give you a little bit of data of what propels us forward. And I know you have probably been dataed out on a Friday at 9 o'clock. You're like, oh my God, another graph. So I'm not going to spend a lot of that because that's where I am. I was looking at these graphs this morning and I was like, who cares? We all know why we're here. But I really want you just to focus on these two numbers, especially, you know, when we're looking at Hispanics and Blacks, and that is our focus, right? In our foundation, that's really has been our focus during the last few years. But what I always look at the green of the students that started and are not enrolled. That is talent that is not likely to go back to college. And there's one thing to never attempt something, but it's another one to attempt something and feel like you have failed. And we all know that amazing student that we have met in our careers that had all of the talent, all of the potential, started, something happened, usually outside of their control, and they did not have the resources to remain or to continue. So I find that to be, those are the numbers that I want you to kind of think about. This is something that I find, I was doing a radio show recently, and literally I was, you know, I like data, and I pulled out this data from this New York Times article, and I printed it, and I was just like having a fit, because I wanted to explain this in a 1-minute segment, and I couldn't. What I want you to kind of pay attention to is, I know that there's a pointer, it's this. Do you see this? This is the number. It's like a slither. It's like thin. It's sad. I just take this graph and it still gives me goosebumps. Because if you're looking at this, when we're looking at highly selective institutions and we're looking, you know, schools like the Ivies and Elite and highly selective, it says here that about 4 in 10 students from the top 0.1% attend an Ivy League or elite university, the equivalent of the share of students from poor income families. Isn't that number frightening? To me, this is just not right. And these colors, just like any psychedelic drug, the more you look at this, the more upset or happy that you get. For me, I see happiness in that I'm aware of the problem. I don't walk around saying, oh, schools are all doing their job. We're all doing our job. We have a goal we have really very clear goals, and this really defines the problem. Because if this is such a high percentage of students from the high income in these schools, and we know what these schools offer, how come there's such a tiny, tiny amount? Again, that little slither. So this is something that I also want to make sure everyone knows, and that is that poor students who attend top colleges do just as well as rich students. I mean, really looking at that number, if you look at the income for parents in the bottom and the income for the students, going to a top university, really it's a telling factor of how well they will do. So if we aren't clear at times as to why it is that we are aiming for these schools, this makes it clear for us. These are some examples of the colleges that enroll the highest percentage of low and middle income students. And I'm going to tell you, I take students on tours of schools all year round to different schools. If you walk many of these schools, it doesn't really look, you don't really, students, this doesn't translate into the ground. Oftentimes, students are still very underrepresented. I promise you I was not going to dwell on these numbers, but I'm going to give you one more and then we're going to move on. 81% of low-income first-time community college students aspire to complete a bachelor's degree. Only 21% transfer to four-year institutions within the next 5 years, and only 10%. So 81, 21, 10. That number is frightening again. I wanted to give you good news today. These numbers are making me sad. Okay, so in terms of public institutions, this is again how are community college students faring in different institutions. You will see that the highest is the highly selective four-year institutions, right? And again, it's not about the name, it's the resources that these schools often have. Let's consider the cost. So if a student, for example, and that has happened to us, in the last 10 years, we started out providing a $30,000 scholarship in 2006 for students to transfer to a four-year institution. By year 5, we were issuing 0 to transfer to a four-year institution. The reason was that four-year institutions were packaging our students at 100%. So here we had set aside monies to say, oh, we want them to go into the best schools, we want them to go into these highly selective schools, and what ended up happening was that we weren't using our money. Because the schools, I mean, if a school has $1 billion endowment, we don't have $1 billion. So it made us very happy, and so we changed the program, so all we wanted to do was really to prepare the students to apply. Isn't that interesting? Many people think that I do fundraising, and I will meet people who come from high income, and they say, well, I'm paying for my students' education, and why do you have to send them to these very expensive universities? Why don't you just spread the love around and accept more students? And I was actually, we're not paying for anything. What we pay for is, what we cover in our program is the expenses to actually apply. So here you will see that a student that ends up going to Stanford University, by the way, this is a slide that Jack and Cook Foundation, who we work very closely with, and I'm proud to consider them a partner in this process, provides, usually presents this slide as a way to also, because they also focus on highly selective institutions. So looking at that number right there, if a student ends up at a state university, you may end up that student may be responsible for more. These are our rates. Our students graduate at 87%. Actually, right now it's at 90%. But if you, again, looking at the red, that is the issue. We can certainly celebrate what we do, but oftentimes it's really under the shadow of how many students don't really complete their degrees. Our model is that we work very closely with our students, like Rachel mentioned, in academics, making sure that our students are really fully taking advantage of their community college experience. I would urge you that for those of you who are working with both high school students as well as community college students, that a model like this provides an ability for you to address all of the issues or most of the issues that a student is likely to face upon transfer, which is making sure that the student has a wide breadth of courses, that they are maintaining their enrollment, that there is an upward trajectory. That's what 4 years, as you know, are looking for. So meaning even if a student didn't do as well the first semester, that they're kind of like moving up. Also, financial. You cannot discuss financial. Don't do a workshop on financial aid. Just that. And say, we've done it. It's great. Now they know what Pell is. You really have to get into what are your family responsibilities? What is your personal budget looking like? Do you have a bank account? We provide a stipend to our students, and oftentimes I have to do all of this work in terms of how important it is for them to get a bank account, because they don't have a bank account in 2018. And so we do direct deposit, and they're like, I don't have that. Also, in terms of personal and social emotional self-reliance, it's really key, resourcefulness and balance. Again, balance is a myth, right? Because there's stages in your life. So I'm not aiming for students to say, I'm a balanced student and everything is clear. It's just what are the goals that you have to do right now? What are the things that you have to focus in? And also, I do a workshop on how to speak to your family about your education trajectory. That buys me more than anything you can imagine. Because I teach them how to speak to their families about their educational future, how their responsibilities will have to change, the possibility of leaving home, being on campus. And again, this is with a 26-year-old. Our students range in ages 18 all the way through 32. So this is how to speak to your spouse, how to speak to your own children. So you have to have these workshops and help them to make the decisions, and also what are the decisions that you would have to make. For many of our students, for example, they may have to buy a car now. And living in New York, our students are coming out of New York City. They don't have a car usually. But our students often, I'll tell you a story. Many of them, they're like, but I have this Metro card. Like this, I have to buy another card to get me further upstate. It's like, no, you're not going to be going there. You're going to live there. The concept of living on campus for commuter students is like, it's very difficult to get them to understand that you're applying for that and that you have to assess housing on campus based on your needs. Again, this is the profile of all community college students, and we never wanted to do any type of creaming, right? We never wanted to say, I want that 18-year-old that could have gotten to Brown University but is doing community college credits, right? We look for students. We have students that have been, I'll show you the problems. We have had students that have been homeless or at risk of being homeless. They have undocumented parents. We have students who are the main support to people outside of the U.S. Literally, they came here to work to support their parents or support siblings. So we have had students with undiagnosed illnesses and disabilities. We have a student that he talks about this now, and this is why I'm free to share with you, who couldn't hear. This is a 20-something-year-old. And I was like, I was getting very frustrated because he would say, what did you say, all the time. And then I started to kind of catch on and say, oh my gosh, I think he has a hearing problem. And so we had to address that. And he was like, no, I don't want my family to know. So this was because he was a main source of support. And being weak to his, you know, as he saw it, was something that would put his family in great stress. Again, this is what we support. I'm not going to get into that because I really want to go over what are the things that we, unless you want me to get into it. But what I would say, this is a very good way. Again, not everybody has this kind of funding, but we do provide a scholarship at the community college, and we provide them with a stipend to reduce their work hours. It's really important for my students not to work more than 15 hours a week, to be able to engage themselves in the community college experience, to be able to have relationships with their professors. So when they ask for a letter of recommendation to apply to Smith College, they actually have a relationship. I'm kind of thinking constantly, how am I going to help this student build a profile that will enable that student to submit an application that will be looked at, admitted on the spot, or at least goes to committee, right? And if they interview my student, I'm almost certain that they will accept them, because it's hard to kind of get them on paper. So I always try to get my students in front of four-year people. And what I have found is that four-year admissions counselors are just as intrigued about the community college students, and they really root for them. You know, they will remember them. So don't ever be afraid or kind of second guess how we have to become a bridge between all schools. I just want to give you a little bit of a story. And, this is Rosa Frias. Oh, Yolanda is smiling because we love Rosa. Rosa right now is actually, Rosa's mom died of colon cancer when she was 15 in Colombia. She ended up coming to the United States. She actually she ended up transferring to Mount Holyoke. When we accepted her, I always ask the question of what is your dream? Which if you ask me that, I'm like, what is this person asking me about a dream? What are you talking about? I have so many dreams. But then usually that's a very hard question to answer by somebody that is in survival mode. So I would say, what is something you want to change, right? But I always ask dream because it makes somebody stop. It's like, oh, what are my dreams? And so she said, you know, I just wish that other kids were able to grow up with their parents, especially from a curable illness like this. She said, I've been doing research, and it's just my mom wasn't tested, right? There was no testing available. Well, she ended up actually, she was in McDonald's. As you can see her resume, she was a babysitter, a shift manager, and this is where she was in Kingsborough. When she transferred to Mount Holyoke, she actually ended up doing the research that she wanted to do at Harvard. And so this is a young woman who we work very hard to say, you're going to get to do that. And that if you have a goal, that these are not dreams, these are just goals. And that if you work on a plan with a student to get there, that student is very likely to meet that. But you need to kind of give them the skills and the language for them to be able to be their self-advocates and to believe that they can do that research. It's not magic, like we don't have fairy dust at the foundation. What it is that we have very clear timelines. Actually, and then just to let you know about Rosa, Rosa right now got accepted into medical schools. She ended up going to a medical school in Puerto Rico, my homeland, and as you know, Puerto Rico is devastated by the hurricanes. And I had some top colleges who knew that she was in Puerto Rico in medical school reach out to me and say, do you think Rosa would want to come to our school while they build the university? And you know what Rosa said to me? She said, no, they need me here. I'm staying here. She said, if things get really bad, I'll let you know, but I'm going to stay here. If I'm going to learn about how to help people through medicine, I'm going to learn it here. And so that's the kind of leader that she is, and I'm so proud of her. This is the guide. It has the 15, again, if you think of Rachel, if you think of someone like Rosa, it was a lack of information. To me, it was a lack of information and resources. And I visit high schools all the time, and I find it incredible in the city that if I ask how many of you send most of your students to community colleges, right? Most of the people will raise their hands, and I would then ask, how many of you know about the full range of schools, including elite schools, right? The information is not there. Or you find that person that would say, oh yeah, I have Joanne here who is going to apply to Harvard because she's like the high performing. And I'm like, what resources do you have for that student to complete a good application? What does she know about Harvard? And it's usually an answer of, she doesn't have the resources. So who's going to review their essays? If many of you know the private counseling game out there in terms of college admissions, people pay a pretty dollar to get their kids to submit really solid applications. You're sending applications that are going to stand right next to well-prepared applications. And I know we had the College Board here speaking about sending scores. You can send the scores as many as you want, as many. But if you have crappy scores, that's not a very technical word, but who am I going to send them to? Right? Ooh, I'm sending like 20,000 schools, the crappiest scores in the bunch. We have to go further than that. But also, the same thing, you have to be able, that student has to make a case as to why they want to transfer to that school. And especially for transfer students, the question of why is so important. So we really have to work in developing that story of the student from an identity process of not the soft story, but what they have been able to pursue and gain. And you have to kind of guide them so that they will have something to talk about. And then when they do, that they can speak about it eloquently and from a point that tells them that it's relevant to the greater good of the world. It's not enough that my mom had cancer and passed away, but it's how this is propelling me forward and how I am basically defined beyond that. Her pride as a community college student, right, cannot be like, I was just passing through community college, I just really meant to go to your school. It has to be a great sense of who you are, where you're headed, in telling that story. How difficult would it be to write that? I mean, as a community college student, I wouldn't have been able to submit a solid application. I can assure you of that. And so again, we have aspirations for those high school students. Yeah, take the test, send the scores everywhere. Right? And then we have aspirations for the community college. Yeah, transfer to all the schools. But then they can really tell their story. But they also don't know how to assess a school. Just because it's an Ivy doesn't mean that that's the best fit for you. So this is why we really wanted to make sure that these schools that we put in a guide, because it took us forever, right, to understand what are the housing policies. You have to know that. Because if you're going to be living off campus, you're back to being a commuter student. And that is okay. But if you want a different experience, you may want to look at another school that actually has on-campus housing for families. Also, if you're 26 years old, 27 years old, it's not really cute to be with a 17-year-old in a dorm. Right? I mean, I can't imagine. We have had students do that, and it's hilarious. It is hilarious. I have to say, why do they think it's so funny to pull the emergency fire? I'm like, I don't know. but just keeping in mind that it's really important for us to be able to give students information about what are the different types of schools. And by the way, for those 4-year institutions here that are not in the book, what I suggest to you is that you look at all of the policy from these 90 schools and see what you're doing, what you're not doing, see how it is that you can best kind of provide a profile online that answers the questions that we're asking. Housing, financial aid, and admissions. For an undocumented student, for example, saying, well, the school has a 100% commitment to meeting financial aid, but if it doesn't apply to a DACA or undocumented student, that's a problem, right? But also, if the status is not considered at the point of admissions, that's favorable. You need to know that. Does the student know that? No, because they just don't know that. The same thing for veterans. Having housing, having graduate housing accessible to you is key. Many of them are married. So if you know that graduate housing is available for you and that they have all of these resources, then you're able to make a decision that broadens the horizon, right? It gives you greater choice. The Seven Sisters Colleges, I am a big fan of women's college because they provide a lot of resources for returning adult women. My students, for example, that have children, if they attend Smith, they have a house fully available for students with children and families. So thinking about that, also at Mount Hood, for example, they have a house just for transfer students of non-traditional age. I'm not going to get into all of the chapters, but what I would want for everyone to kind of focus chapter 4, how to become a transfer star, it really gives a very clear plan of what are the things that the student has to do at the 2-year college to develop the profile. So I have students that are in an associate's degree college, associate's degree, and they don't know the difference between a PhD and an MD and a law degree and a JD and all of that. But they tell me they're doing that. But I am, I'm going to become an attorney. I'm going to become a lawyer. And they don't know any of it. So never underestimate the power of language. As an ESL learner myself, my world, my map to the world was language. It always was. It was how did I understand the world around me by being able to explain it in a way that was relevant to me and to my family, my loved ones, and my future. So don't ever feel like you're kind of talking down to someone and saying, let's discuss what are the types of degrees that are available and how they relate to your career path. In the book, you will find that in terms of veteran-friendly schools, non-traditional and family-friendly schools, each one has kind of what makes that school earn that badge. So it's really important that this is a good way for you to determine whether a school would be friendly towards that group of students. And again, for 4 years, this is a very good way for you to say, am I doing that? Am I not doing that? Why aren't we? For DACA and undocumented friendly schools, the same thing is true. There are certain things that you should look for that makes that school friendly towards that group of students. We're using Stanford University here because I often feel like, I actually was at this conference and somebody said, oh, Stanford isn't accepting transfer students. So the myth of transfer, but by the way, I am guilty of that. Many years back, if you would have asked me, does Stanford accept transfer students? I would have said, no, they don't, right? For me, out of my own lack of understanding of the field, actually they do. And they don't accept just 2. I know schools that do that. Like, yeah, we have a transfer program. How many do you accept? 2. One is a ballerina, the other one is a gold medalist. That's not a transfer program. I'm not going to tell you what school that is, but I actually had a meeting recently with us. They do. It's a school that has an orientation for transfer students. It's a school that accepts non-traditional students, provides housing based on needs. Again, we can all say, oh, but this is a very wealthy school. This has, well, of course. That's why they're able to do that. But there also has to be a spirit of acceptance and welcoming to do that. Because you can't make it up, right? That other school that says, yeah, we transfer friendly, it's not. And by the way, take a look at that. Take a look at the schools that are there. You find it's like a gossip column. You go through the pages. It's like, wait a minute, they accepted 1? That's not right. Right? They get no badges. Sorry, it's personal to me. Caduce is a good example. Caduce left Hostos Community College, got accepted to Stanford into their engineering program. By the way, out of 60-something students that we have had how many? Rhoda? 4? What? 5 at Stanford. So you see, they accept students this is a young man from Nigeria who had to provide some type of support to 5 of his siblings. His mom, his dad drove a taxi, his mom was home helping. So again, this is not that special student that was doing all of the things already. This is somebody that we worked to the goal. Had he decided not to apply to these schools, he would have had choice, right? He could have attended any school. This is the website. How much time do we have? We don't have time. Well, you have the resources, but what I want to make sure, I'm just gonna run through. I just love Rachel, so I'm just gonna leave that there and open it up to some questions. But I want you to kind of see also in Rachel and in the story of all of our students is that there was a time where they went begrudgingly to community college, like Rachel did. Just walked in like, just here, they didn't get into that other school. But also that there are some students that if we know that high school is not providing the resources needed for them to get into the schools of their dreams, or the schools that will fulfill their needs, that if we have an opportunity at community college to have a do-over. Let it not be that once again, we undermatch them. Again, we're constantly talking about undermatching for high school students. We're undermatching as well. And I don't mean name, but I mean in need. I don't think any four-year school wants to accept a student that they cannot fulfill their degree. I really haven't seen that often. So it's really important that we all look to put together programming that will kind of create these bridges. Any questions? Yes.
I want to preface by saying with this question, I am not insinuating that you're pushing these institutions. Yeah. I'm just curious about the support that you're providing for students that are often transitioning from those institutions and often very wealthy institutions. So I'm just kind of curious what support networks they're getting when they might be entering.
I mean, if you look at, if you look, all of our students are of color. Plus, many of them have other factors such as they're 26, 27, 30. So add all of that up. Some of them have kids. Okay? So one of the things that we do is that I work a lot on identity development and recognition. My student has to be proud. My student is not looking to assimilate, to become part, to kind of get lost in that. So we work a lot in leadership development of understanding your own history, of understanding the history of higher education in the United States. I do a whole workshop about that. I tell them these schools were not necessarily built in contemplation of accepting all genders, all races, all income brackets, all religions. They were not. But thankfully, there are people that are working in those institutions and they have progressed enough that we are in a different place. We're not in a perfect place. But to me, having an identity discussion, whatever, I mean, we have the first transgender woman attending Wilson. Think about that. Last year, our scholar is the first out transgender woman to get into Wilson. I celebrate that. It makes me sad. Because we know that there's so many women that are in the same situation that did not get accepted, did not apply, were ostracized. So for me, for her, we work with her in understanding that she had a place at any institution, including a women's college. We have to develop that sense of both understanding history, understanding your history, understanding the challenges ahead, but I also point not to the fact that there may be people who didn't think about your arrival many years back, but today they are thinking about it. And for those that are not, and we have had many issues with students going to schools, especially in this last year. I actually was traveling almost the entire time after the election, going to address issues in different schools. From newspapers being left in front of my students' dorms, to walking by and saying, this is our time, to any of them. I've seen that. So you have to just work on that. So I hope that answers your question. Sorry. Yes.
How have you gotten buy-in from these elite schools to look favorably upon your students? So in other words, to me, it seems as though it has to be more than just the admissions area, so that the students are really seen as valuable applicants and potentially valuable students. So how have you gotten the higher levels? It seems to me you're doing a lot of work on the ground, which is great, but I think what is the buy-in been from these institutions at the upper level?
I think that, especially when I started in 2006, I have been to four-year institutions. They asked me if I knew where I was. That's one of our best partners today. What we have done is educate them about the students. And I can provide data all day long, but I have brought in groups of students, our students, to institutions all over the United States. Like literally, we would get on a plane and I would bring 5 students and say, just, you know, let's just, or bring colleges to our offices. That also is something. I think it allows those schools to be able to judge and assess students in a very different way. I think it has also been a learning experience for everyone at the table, because I also, again, there were schools that I wasn't considering for my students because I didn't think were transfer friendly. And so it has been a learning experience, and I would say to anyone here, understanding what policies they have and to see how they would apply to your specific student would be key, but also just picking up the phone and speaking to people at these elite schools has been magical. It's like, my students are like, you know, I spoke to the dean at Brown. I have to tell you, Dean Brown is really good about answering calls from students. But we assume, again, we live in a space. I worked at a city school college, so for me, I didn't answer phone calls because I had like 5,000 students, right? So knowing that these schools are often well resourced, and if that person cannot answer, they'll have somebody who will. So it's building that bridge and giving the students, again, I teach my students email, phone etiquette, and how to walk into a room to wow people. So it's making sure that a student is fully packaged to be able to tell the story as well. So I can imagine bringing in, we've all seen those groups of students, especially from low income, first generation, and students of color, that 40 of them show up with 2 people in a bus to a highly selective school. What are we doing? When I don't understand it with the students. The other students are showing up with grandma, grandpa, sister, and they're able to have a discussion. Oh, isn't this Harvard amazing? Isn't it great? Then I will never bring 40, 50 students to a school. I bring small groups of students that school will get to know, because that's how it's done in private practice. Sorry, you didn't.
Can you speak to the role of leadership? I think that's very important. Because the way leaders think and their agenda also drive setting some big policies. So what has been your experience with presidents and KAs on trying to get them to understand why?
I asked the president, who's your point person to get to discuss diversity? Because diversity in campuses is discussed from many perspectives. So I usually, just like in a community college, by the way, the same is true in community colleges. So for me, it's not usually the person that wrote the diversity plan, it's the person who's executing the plan, which is usually not the president or the dean. I go to what I call transfer champions. It may be a transfer person, so I haven't had a lot of luck in getting to those. Although I meet with them, my meeting is just to get me to the person that's working with the students and who's making the decisions. Because there is in this country a pull to get diverse groups of students and understand diversity, but I think it's very new for many campuses. And I know that. I'm not jaded, but I'm fully aware that it's going to be done by 3 people who are sitting there looking at those applications. If it then fulfills their 5-year plan of diversity, it's great, but their 5-year plan of diversity is usually very different than mine. Because that you saw the graph, right? I mean, those plans of diversity is like, we're going to bring in this number, but they have to put in the resources to recruit them. So the short answer is not a lot of luck, but a lot of luck with the people that are doing the work. They want the students. They do. I haven't gotten a closed door or being asked if I know where I am for a few years now. And I did tell them, I know where I am. My students are amazing, and we're gonna get them. I really said it just like that. I remember, because then I left and I cried about it. Just one last question, because I think we're running out of time, right? Yes.
So if your students do have any issues on campus, are you the first person to contact? Are you still, like, still very
Yeah, we continue to work with them through their 4-year enrollment.
No, but I'm saying like a campus administrator, if something happens, whether it's like academics, social, and whatever it is, they reach out to you?
They reach out to their 4-year. I do a whole thing about how to access resources on campus. So I do a workshop for them on how to avail yourself of services on campus. I'm not going to be there all the time, and neither is my staff. So we work very hard for our students to understand what the study abroad office does, what counseling services are. We actually do a separate tour of that.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is, like, if something goes wrong with us, they're failing, there's something happening, do they just work with that student separately and you're not out of the picture?
No, I'm never out of the picture. I show up.
Right, okay.
I had a student tell me they were leaving campus, and I said, okay, I'll meet you at the airport.
Okay.
Yeah, so meet you at the airport over there. Because you're not getting on a plane. Thank you for coming today.